Growing up in a middle-class conservative home, it wasn't easy to watch horror movies. As a young kid, it was out of the question. When I got older and I could stay up later, I'd watch what I could on a Friday or Saturday night, or watch movies with friends on sleepover nights. We'd watch movies like The Terminator, Aliens, or Leviathan, and I guarantee you that no one got much sleep those nights, either from the sugar or the movies. One series of movies I never got to see until much later in life was The Blob. And if I can make a confession, I hadn't seen the original from start to finish until I watched it for this segment. Sure, I had seen the sequel, Beware of the Blob, in the video store, some clips on YouTube, a few television spoofs like Simpsons or Futurama, and even one of my favorite video games, Space Quest 4, had a reference to a man-eating slime. My only real recollection of the Blob was when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I was watching some cable show that was highlighting the 1988 remake, and it showed some of the diner kitchen scene, and that freaked me right out, especially the whole bulging pipe. But aside from those incidents, the Blob creeped right past me until now. I actually didn't know there was 3 movies until recently. When I saw the sequel on the shelf at the movie store as a kid, I thought it was the original. But that is not the case. So for the most part, all 3 films followed the same basic structure. Specifics are different, but the main premise is the same. The Blob is found by someone. It claims its first victim and grows and grows and grows. Teens discover it, alert the authorities. Nobody believes them. And finally, the authorities get moving and eventually the Blob is defeated. But let's highlight some of the details on how they're similar and how they're different. Introduction. Blob 58, a meteor falls from the sky. In Blob 72, a sample is found during an excavation for a pipeline in the Arctic. And in Blob 88, a satellite falls from the sky. Main characters. Blob 58, there's Steve and Jane, and they're on a date. Blob 72, Bobby and Lisa are boyfriend-girlfriend. And Blob 88, there's Brian and Meg, who are reluctant allies. First victims. Blob 58, there's an old farmer. Blob 72, it's a fly and then a cat. Blob 88 is a homeless guy? I don't know, he doesn't seem very homeless to me. He's got a pretty good shack going on there. The hospital scene. Blob 58, Blob takes out the old man, the nurse, and then the doctor. Blob 88 takes out the homeless guy and Meg's date. And there's no hospital scene in Blob 72. Discovering the cold is its weakness. Blob 58, the Blob retreats from a freezer that Steve and Jane are in. Blob 72, the Blob flees from the interior of Lisa's car because the AC is on. Blob 88, the Blob acquiesces from the meat locker where Brian and Meg are hiding. Big panic scenes. Blob 58, the Blob attacks a movie theater. Blob 78, the Blob attacks a bowling alley / rec center. And Blob 88, the Blob attacks a movie theater and then the town hall or possibly the library. It's hard to tell. The Blob is defeated. Blob 58, the Blob is frozen by fire extinguishers and then dropped into the Arctic. Blob 72, it's frozen by an ice rink cooling system. Blob 88, liquid nitrogen, and a charge pack. These movies are effects-heavy creature features, and all 3 do their effects really well for their respective time periods. Blob 58 is the real innovator in my opinion, because with limited resources, it created a pretty terrifying monster. It used reverse photography, varying camera speeds, miniature effects, and matte paintings. Both the 72 and 88 versions used a lot of these techniques. The 72 version was the first to show a third-person view of the blob absorbing people and using part of itself to reach for an individual, like an arm or a tentacle. Blob 88 expands on the arm-tentacle theme, grabbing people and pulling them in, and shows the blob moving much faster and fluidic. All the movies have enjoyable characters for the horror genre. There isn't too much overacting, and I think they capture the teen experience decently well for each time period. Each film also adds tropes to the horror genre. 58 really starts off the whole no one believes me trope with the town not believing the teenagers. 72 adds the bad people get bad things done to them in turn trope with the bully cop being absorbed before the stoner hippies get it. 88 really plays up the trope of two different heroes being forced to work together despite their differences. You can actually see all these tropes at work in modern sci-fi and horror projects like Stranger Things. Nancy feels no one will believe her about Barb, and she's forced to work with Jonathan to find who took Will and Barb. And throughout the series, lots of bad characters get their comeuppance. For instance, Troy, who bullies Mike and Dustin and Lucas, gets his arm broken by Eleven. Billy is drugged by his sister while fighting Steve, and Brenner gets taken out by the Demogorgon. So, no movie is perfect. And even though all the movies have some great moments, they equally have some poor parts. One common thing I noticed is that the Blob has a particular MO it follows except when it doesn't. For the most part, it's a slow-moving, ambush-type predator. It sneaks up on unsuspecting prey and absorbs them. It seems to usually go after the easiest target. However, in Blob 58, it goes for everyone in the diner when there's at least 20 people outside it could go after. Similarly, the Blob 72 does the same thing, but there's a butt ton of people outside the rec center. It could easily go absorb them, but it tries to go after the heroes. Blob 88 just has the blob do whatever it wants to. It absorbs Meg's date. She falls back and faints after his arm falls off, and she should get absorbed, right? But she doesn't. I guess she went a little heavy on the high school cheerleader perfume. Maybe the blob's other weakness is obsession by CK. It's a case of Deus Ex Monstrica. The monster works until it doesn't. I don't have much to gripe about Blob 58. The ending is a little anticlimactic for my tastes, and once I got over the fact that Steve McQueen is playing a 17-year-old when he was 30, things were okay. The Blob's body count is the lowest of all the films, but that's kind of to be expected. 72 has some dumb scenes that could be cut down, like when a hippie stoner walks in to get his hair cut at like 10 p.m. on a Friday night, and the only one available is this really pretentious stylist. The scene just goes on too long. Some of the blob effects are also pretty lame. In 72, either the blob looks really good or it looks kinda dumb. There's not really any middle ground. Blob 88 probably holds the most grievances for me. First, the movie is a reboot and not a remake. The origin of the blob is altered drastically and has hand-like protuberances that grab people and a giant mouth that looks like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. It drips acid on a wood bench to show how dangerous it is, but it never leaves burn marks when it travels. It absorbs people and they either melt really quick or really slow depending on what the plot needs. It almost has like a sentience about it, but it's explained away as a microbe that's been mutated by space radiation that the government knew about because they knew it was on a satellite. Ugh. But my biggest gripe is the overuse of gore. I personally don't like a lot of gore in movies because gore isn't scary. It's disgusting. It's a totally different emotional response. The movie seems to go out of its way to be gory, and I feel that by the time you see the kid who dies in the sewer, yeah, they kill a kid, you've seen the melting face in pain so many times it's lost all effects. If they showed maybe a third of all the face melting nastiness when it actually happens, it would be shocking. One minor thing that doesn't happen is this blob doesn't change color. In all the other movies, as the blob absorbs more people, it turns more and more red. This blob stays pink and purple. The last thing that really raises my hackles is a subplot with a reverend and a frozen piece of the blob at the end. It's totally unnecessary. And I know the other blob movies end with a "the end?" but this was a setup to a sequel that never happened because Blob 88 tanked at the box office. Its budget was around $10 million and it made somewhere between $7.5 to $8 million. Yeah, it's kind of clear that most of the budget went towards special effects and then probably actor salary, some production stuff, and then whatever was left over was for the story, which kind of makes sense because a lot of the story is basically a repeat of Blob 58. Alright, it's time to give the cheese stamp of approval. For Blob 58, I give it an A. It's a fun watch with great effects and acting for its time. It's full-fat cream cheese. You know, the one that you make cakes out of. Whereas Blob 72, it's a step down. I like this movie, but it suffers from some truly bad effects in places, and some scenes just go on too long. It's a B for me. The Philly light cream cheese that you spread on some crackers when you need to convince yourself that what you're eating isn't that bad for you. And although I ripped into Blob 88, I still don't hate the movie. It's probably the best effects out of all the movies, but that's all it's really got. And aside from adding a few new tropes to the genre, it's a C- in my opinion. It's like the nacho cheese you get from a 7-Eleven nacho tray. Fun at first, but will get less and less appealing with every bite. My name is Ryan. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, you can't spell cheese without a B.